This is Buffalo's Uncensored Sports Show. You're watching Buffalo After Dark. Welcome to Buffalo After Dark, everybody. It is Wednesday night, May 29th. You got myself, you got Mr. Tiny Hands Hansen here, who is hoping that the Rags absolutely choke on themselves, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But how's your week? How's your week going?
In general, it's been good. I actually had a lot of family on my mom's side over the weekend who I haven't seen in like a decade, so it was nice seeing them. And then the neek day, I went to my mother-in-law's house and I saw my nephew there, and he's like 2.5 years old. But no, everything was good. And then weekend, like work in general, is just it's been going by pretty quickly. I had a good Memorial Day weekend, and I actually booked my tickets for the third Road to 32 episode. And I think I mentioned it last week, which was Indianapolis, but I'll
Mm-hmm.
reveal the third one at the end of the show. But I'm going to
Nice.
keep it as a surprise for right now.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And then, yeah, pretty much here. I mean, of course, we already mentioned everybody last week. We're booked for Seattle, so we're good to go on that. We've got our flights. We're all set and ready to go. As legend would have it, we both arrive only within about 3 minutes of each other. I don't know how the hell we pulled that off, but we did.
Yeah,
And
and then
and
go ahead.
then when we leave, it's only about an hour, hour and a half apart, so that's not too bad.
Not at all. And then for me, I also announced that I got my flight and my tickets for game day to Indianapolis. So that's going to be fun. I can't wait to do that, honestly. And that's probably the one that really struck me because I was so convinced that I was going to Detroit in December, but
Mm-hmm.
instead I'm going to Indianapolis 2 weeks after the Seattle trip.
Nice. Well, I was gonna say, you never know. You might have to catch an Indiana Pacers game while you're there because that arena's next door.
True. I mean, I'm not a basketball fan, but I do want to see the Indianapolis Fury, which is the ECHL team for the Chicago Blackhawks.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a game going on that time, I might look into it. I'm not really committed to it, but
There you go.
as far as Indy 500 or
Mm-hmm.
whatever I get my hands on, I'm excited to do that. So I'll definitely give you my first impression when I get to Indianapolis down later on this year.
Nice. Well, we'll tell you the Indy 500 was just run, so you ain't gonna be seeing that there. But you never know. They might have a tour of the racetrack, so that might be something to check out.
I mean, considering my status quo, I might be going go-kart racing or something like that on the track. So I'm not entirely sure yet. But imagine me riding a go-kart in the Indy 500.
There you go. That'd be something. Yeah, or take your stadium tour of Lucas Oil Stadium or
Oh yeah.
Gainbridge Fieldhouse, which is like right there. So, you got some good stuff. And of course, as we go throughout the show today too, we'll have the Western Conference final updates on because Dallas and Edmonton are playing. So it'll be interesting to see how everything works out. But with that being said, let's jump right into it. And things got very interesting in Toronto over the past week. And basically, Mitch Marner may not be coming back to the Maple Leafs.
Yeah, about that. I had a feeling that Marner was going to be the odd man out in Toronto. I mean, I was talking to a buddy of mine who's not really a big hockey fan, but I was talking to Millman about it. He's not a big hockey guy,
Mm-hmm.
but point being is I was talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I said that team is going to be ripped apart in the span of a month. And I told him is that the Leafs can't afford to keep everybody. Yeah, they'll have $18 million in cap space, but that's not going to be enough to keep everybody around. So if they're serious about contending for within the next 5 years, they have to trade one of the core four. And Mitch Marner is most likely the one that's going to be the odd man out. And a lot of interesting things have come out about this. One being from Elliot Freeman. He said that there's at least a 5% chance that Mitch Marner rejoins the Leafs next season. Wait, in other words, he's pretty much doubtful at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest twist from Darren Drager was he said that Mitch Marner has submitted a 9 team list of teams he wants to be traded to.
Interesting. Yeah, and even taking a look at the hockey news, there was actually an article of 5 possible destinations that they were speculating on, and this is written by Adam Perteau. But one of the destinations they thought about were the Pittsburgh Penguins. They also thought about the Chicago Blackhawks. They mentioned the New York Islanders as a possible landing spot. Then the Anaheim Ducks and Utah, yet to be named hockey team.
You know what's weird? I was just revisiting the episode we did 2 weeks ago, and I remember you asking me, like, Bobby, what do you think is going to happen with Mitch Marner? What team would take him on? And I said, I wouldn't be surprised if Utah flips Clayton Keller for Mitch Marner. And I also
Hmm.
said Chicago was a candidate. The Islanders, I doubted because I want to believe that they're in the conversation, but I have a hard time believing this because they don't have a lot of cap. So I think if I'm reading the math correctly, the Islanders right now have about $7.5 million in cap space. They're not
Hmm.
going to be able to afford him unless they
Right.
trade like JG Pashow or something like that. And I mentioned that he might go to San Jose and a cap dump,
Hmm.
or I don't know what else is going to happen because the Islanders themselves have been in the news. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I would love Marner to be on the Islanders. I would not doubt that at all. But I think realistically, he has a really good chance of going to a team like Utah or Chicago. It's up in the air. It's
Yeah.
it's up in the air. And the other thing you have to be considerate too is he makes Matthews money. He makes $11.5 million.
Hmm.
So it's going to be almost impossible to eat that contract without having to give up a ransom.
Right. And here's like one of the things I kind of look at with this deal. If Utah were to pick him up, what a perfect way for new ownership to make a huge splash in Utah's first season. I mean, that would be instant in terms of making some changes happen. And basically, with one of the other things that they're thinking is that it could possibly give Utah just a little bit of jump to where they could potentially look at maybe finally tasting the playoffs for the first time. So I mean that's definitely one thing there. I could see if the Islanders were to make it happen, I mean that'll absolutely help them in every single way possible. And then even looking at if he were to join Pittsburgh, then what that does is it gives additional depth on top of Crosby, on top of Malkin, on top of everybody else that they have. So I mean that'll certainly help. But then if you look at him joining Chicago, then what a perfect person to team up with Connor Bedard.
Well, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, Bedard and Marner, I said a few weeks ago, would be a 1-2 punch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so, like I said, I love the idea of Utah being the team
Yeah.
just for the fact that, it's a new franchise. Everybody wants to see what they become with their identity because we don't even know what it is yet. And we have been given an update. We'll tackle later. The Ducks is an interesting one because I can't really think of anybody except maybe Trevor Zegras that the Ducks would be willing to trade
Mm-hmm.
because Zegras has been unhappy with his cap situation for a while. He wants a long-term deal, but they're just not giving it to him. Troy Terry, I believe, just got a brand new extension from the Ducks not even a year ago. So Anaheim's situation is very, very different.
Right.
And we don't really talk about the Ducks a lot, but I think this is a good example of what could be if he's just chasing the bag or he actually wants to play on a
Mm-hmm.
contender. Because when you're playing in a market like Toronto, expectations are exorbitant and they are extremely high in Toronto
Right.
with guys like Matthews and Marner and Tavares and Nylander. Like it's impossible to keep the core four
Mm-hmm.
with what they got going on right now. So
Right.
for him to go to a team like, the Islanders or the Blackhawks, I think is great. But
Yeah.
it all comes down to what the team is willing to give up for them. Because I think if there wasn't any indication in, my first tip is the Islanders, and I'll explain why. Did you see the trade they made?
Well, they did make a trade earlier with the Blackhawks, and they basically ended up swapping first round picks in this year's draft. So, I mean, that's basically where the Blackhawks are going to pick at 18th, Islanders are going to drop down to 20th, and then, of course, they're going to have two second round choices. So, I mean, not a huge deal, but it does give the Islanders some more picks to work with. So, I mean, that is a plus.
I definitely think this has something to do with Marner, in my opinion. I don't know what Lou Lamoriello is doing. I don't know why he made this trade to begin with. If anything,
Mm-hmm.
he could have just stayed where he was. But maybe there was an opportunity for an extra pick, and he probably just ran away with it. That's my guess why he made the deal in the first place. But as far as Marner, again, the Islanders are going to have to eat a lot of cap in order for this to
Yeah.
work. And the funny thing is, I have heard JG Pajot, who I mentioned numerous times, is on the trade block. I've also heard Anders Lee is available for trade.
That's an interesting name.
Mm-hmm. And I think anybody who gets Anders Lee, keep in mind, he makes $7 million. He's been having a phenomenal career with the Islanders. He's usually a consistent goal scorer, 25, 30 goals a year. He's had some key injuries in the past, but when he's healthy, the Islanders were a force. in the
Yeah.
playoffs within the last couple of years with Andersley in the lineup. So I think whoever trades for him or Pajot, I think that's going to give the Islanders a little bit of a lift to kind of just say, all right, we need to go out and make the deal for Marner.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things that came out of that article that I just mentioned is they mentioned what would happen if Toronto were to possibly trade with the Blackhawks and basically have Marner play with Connor Bedard. And one of the things that they mentioned, the X factor in this trade, is Seth Jones, because they were mentioning that Seth Jones would join Toronto, and that's an instant booster of defense.
Well, it kind of makes sense because the Blackhawks have been trying to get rid of his contract for at least a few years now. I mean, if they were so severe of getting rid of him, they should have never have extended him to an 8-year deal when he first got traded from Columbus a few years ago. And I just said to myself, what the hell was Chicago thinking when they made that deal? Trading for Seth Jones, trading that first round pick. And I think if I remember, they gave up Adam Boqvist in the deal just to get Seth Jones.
Yeah. And then thinking about what would happen if he were to go to Pittsburgh, think about some of the players he'd have: Sidney Crosby, Malkin, Eric Carlson, Chris Letang. I mean, they're looking to jump back into the playoffs after they had an absolute crap season.
I don't know. I don't think Pittsburgh would be the best spot. I mean, yeah, it would definitely help Crosby and Malkin
Right.
because they're trying to go all in before they all retire. But is bringing in Mitch Marner really the best idea?
I don't think it is for them. And the reason being is because that core has been together so long, and they're literally at this point, they're past their prime. I mean, yes,
Yeah,
can
and
Crosby get it done? Sure. Can Malkin still get it done? Sure. But here they are, almost 20 years in the league. I mean, they have nothing left to prove. And the thing is that Pittsburgh has not drafted the best in the last 5 years. In fact, I don't even think they've really done a whole ton to really rebuild that core and get that core ready, especially for when the time comes that Crosby and Malkin are going to step down. They just haven't done it. Have there been some good depth players that they brought in? Sure. Brian Rust is one of them. Ali Mata, I remember seeing him before they traded him. He would have been a really good fit to stay with the Penguins. It's just it wasn't in the cards. And some of their goaltending, I mean, they need to build some depth there. But at the same time, Pittsburgh, I'm not comfortable with him going there because I don't see it being a good long term fit. Now, would it help with giving them an established player? Sure, but they have really they don't have a big core that they can really build around right now.
I'm not sure if that's a good idea. Because you were mentioning the core is getting up there in age, but here's something else you have to remember. Kyle Dubas is a very aggressive general manager, and he's done it within his stint in Toronto, and he did it last year when he brought in Eric Carlson from the Sharks. Here's a problem with this already, Tom. If you look at the big picture, Pittsburgh does not have a first round pick. They traded it to San Jose.
Right.
They gave up the 14th pick
Which
from the Carlson
that
deal.
hurts them right off the bat.
Yeah. So if let's say the Leafs say we want a first round pick for Mitch Marner, the Penguins don't have a first round pick this year
Mm-hmm.
unless they're willing to take on the 2025 first round pick. And that I think alone, the Penguins are over the cap. They may have some flexibility, since trading, Jake Gensel, but again, Crosby's going to probably get an extension that will finish his career in
Yeah,
Pittsburgh.
Malkin will probably
Same with
get one.
Gino.
Yeah.
Same with Gino. Gino's probably going to be the same thing. There was talks of Chris Letang being traded for years. Eric
Mm-hmm.
Carlson's not going anywhere because he just got traded like a
Right,
year ago.
exactly. Why would
Almost.
they flip him already? And then
Yeah,
you figure
exactly.
Marner wanting almost 11 million a year. I mean, that's that's oh, I don't know how to describe that other than basically that's Matthews money.
Oh yeah, and there's been projected rumors about Leon Draisaitl's next contract, which is $13.5 million. That's more than what Austin Matthews makes.
Right. And Matthews is better in production than Draisaitl. So,
Yeah, and get this. So if Edmonton, for just hypothetically, if they were to trade him to a team, let's say like San Jose, for example, if they were to trade Leon Draisaitl to San Jose, because we touched up on this briefly, what are the chances that Draisaitl's production is nowhere near what it is now with Connor McDavid?
I don't see it being up there. And the reason being is that he's not going to have the depth of players around him like he has with the Oilers.
Right. because that team is just Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl by themselves. I mean, Zach Hyman, to be completely fair, I would say is the modern equivalent to Matt Molson. And
Mhm.
I've talked about this several times in the past, where Molson was really good on the Islanders, and then he got traded to the Sabres for Thomas Vanek and did absolutely nothing after that.
Hmm. Right, exactly. And only recently did Edmonton finally start getting better with their goaltending with Skinner. I mean, you have King who's still playing there. I mean, Hyman you mentioned. You have Nugent Hopkins, of course, Sam Gagner. But at the same time, I mean, Edmonton at least has a core, and at least they have some depth. San Jose doesn't have that because they're still rebuilding.
Right, and I completely understand that. But if you're San Jose and you're trying to retool your rebuild, and you bring in a guy that's going to be 28 years old next season, and he still has a binding contract until next season,
Mm-hmm.
that's a risk that you better take if you're going to make that
Yeah.
deal. It almost feels similar to when the Sabres traded for Jeff Skinner a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
where it's not like Marner wants out of Toronto. It's just he knows on the financial standpoint he can't stick around.
Right.
So the only thing that really get him what he wants is to be traded to another team
Mm-hmm.
and play his contract from there. Like that's the only logical thinking I can think of behind the situation with Mitch Marner. It's just insane to think that some teams would be willing to eat his contract. I get some teams have cap to afford him,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the assets.
Right. It's a very true statement. And I mean, when you look at teams like San Jose and Chicago, I mean, they have money they can spend. The Islanders are a little bit more in cap hell. Pittsburgh definitely is more in cap hell than a lot of these other teams. It's just going to be a tough fit, basically, wherever he wants to go. So, I guess then the question comes up to Marner: do you take a pay cut to go somewhere, or to stay with the Leafs? I don't think he's going to want to do that.
No, not in this economy, not in this if they're in a time of inflation and in financial lows. I don't see it happening. I mean, it would save teams money, sure, but again, this is a player that's probably been one of the best players in the NHL in the last like decade at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to be completely fair, Mitch Marner didn't completely go off until after Matthews arrived.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but basically with there, still no action in the Edmonton and Dallas game, so we'll let you know how things go as we get further into that. But Seattle made some news this week, and they have decided to bring in Dan Bylsma as the new head coach, which will be the second head coach in history for that team. And all I can say is, Seattle, what the fuck are you doing? Because I'm like, Seattle, here's how Dan Bylsma, aka Disco Dan, works. Unless you have someone like a McJesus, a Sidney Crosby, a Gino, or like a Draisaitl type player, he ain't getting it done. And he didn't get it done with Eichel and everybody, although Eichel's a prima donna fucking bitch, I will say that, but which the Sabres did absolutely nothing with him. But I'm like, Seattle, there are better choices than Bylsma. And the only reason he won the Stanley Cup was basically with Michel Therrien's system being in play. And ever since he switched everything, he basically never got the job done except for being first round and out 98% of the time. It's just, come on, guys. You could have done better than Bylsma.
Come
Seriously.
on. I mean, the worst case scenario would have been Todd McClellan. I mean, McClellan, I think, would have been a better option
And
at that point than
yeah, same
Bylsma of
here.
all
I
people.
think so too. At least he can do something with them.
What has Dan Bylsma done since leaving the Sabres, mind you, to become a
Zero.
qualified head coach? He's done
Zero.
nothing. Yeah, he was an assistant under Jeff Blashill in Detroit. He was
Which
in their
Blashill
AHL
sucks.
system in Grand Rapids for a few years, and then he became the head coach of the Coachella Valley Firebirds in the AHL. And now all of a sudden,
Which
Seattle's
he did
turned.
nothing with.
Yeah, yeah, Seattle has now become the Western equivalent of the Buffalo Sabres. In other words, if you bring in your own coach, you bring him in from the farm.
Yeah. Good luck, Seattle.
God.
Although we may grace you with our presence this October when we are in Seattle, we may step inside your arena.
If we're lucky to get a game there.
Yeah, and if Dan Bylsma does not put me to sleep in the stands like he did once.
Well, that's not the only team that made a stupidity out of themselves. How about going to the Great White North in Winnipeg, Manitoba? Jesus Christ.
Scott
I think
Arniel.
that situation is even worse.
You go from a good head coach to an absolute shitbag.
So, for those of you who don't know, Rick Bowness, we mentioned a few weeks ago, retired from 40 plus years of coaching in the NHL, respectively. He's done a
Hmm.
phenomenal job.
Great career.
His replacement is a fucking joke. You go from Rick Bowness to Scott Arniel.
Eh,
What is wrong with you?
I know, right?
Okay, okay. I gotta say something here.
Okay.
First of all,
Is this like
you
one of
have a
those
team,
break out the bullhorn moments?
quite possibly. I gotta say something here. I don't know what's better. Hiring this guy to be your savior of your franchise from the possibility of relocation, or hiring someone else that actually would be qualified for the coach, like a different quality coach. Like, what about Todd McClellan? Gerard Gallant was available, and of all people you bring in is Scott fucking Arniel. That guy has done
Yeah.
jack shit in Columbus,
Yeah.
and yet he didn't do shit, jack shit either when he was an assistant coach in Edmonton. I'm pretty sure.
Hmm.
And now on top of all that, you think that guy is your best option to be a head coach in the NHL
Not
again?
even close. Not even close.
No.
Glant would have been a much better option. McClellan would have been a much better option. Hell, Bylsma's jockstrap would have been a better option than Scott fucking Arniel. In fact, you want to know how bad his record is in the NHL?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, he's only coached 123 games. He went 45, 60, and 18.
Oh my
What does
God.
that tell you?
That tells me right there he's just as incompetent.
Yeah. And in 5 seasons in AHL, he had 396 games. Now, the AHL, he did better. He was 218, 136, and 42 with 4 playoff appearances. But that doesn't say much because the AHL is not NHL caliber in terms of
No.
what you have in the big clubs. The fact that you're 45, 60, and 18, I mean, altogether, yikes. I mean, if you're like looking at that out of 123 games, he has a .366 winning percentage.
That's embarrassing.
.366. That's below 500.
The only thing this guy has done was he basically Scott Arniel. You want to hear something really interesting? Because I
Besides
just looked
maybe
up on his
Snick
red.
Rick Nash's old jockstrap that might have been left behind from retirement.
No, no, no. This is something even more interesting. So, according to his Wikipedia file, in summer of 2013, Scott Arniel left the Vancouver Canucks organization with head coach Alain Vigneault to join the New York Rangers. I knew he was an assistant for the Rangers,
Right.
but here's the word that kicks the balls. The New York, sorry, on April 7th, 2018, Scott Arniel was fired along with head coach Alain Vigneault and assistant coach Darryl Williams. And on August 6th, 2018, reigning Stanley Cup champions, the Washington Capitals hired Scott Arniel as an assistant to replace Lane fucking Lambert.
Oh,
So you're
Jesus.
telling me 3 months prior to the Cavs winning the Stanley Cup, Barry Trotz goes to the Islanders. Everyone knows that.
Hmm.
And then Lane Lambert follows him there,
Right.
and you hire that guy?
Yikes.
And you know what's even more embarrassing? He has not been a head coach or in any formality in over 10 years.
Right.
That's insane.
What does that
And
tell
the
you? He's not good enough.
and the last team he coached as a head coach, it was in 2012, was the Columbus Blue Jackets. His replacement was Claude Noel. Yeah, Claude Noel was the friggin' interim head coach because Arniel was so ass in Columbus.
Yeah, that they got rid of him. And it's pretty funny that Kekalainen got rid of him before Kekalainen himself got booted.
You know, this is embarrassing on its own. But you know what it is? I would rather hire a gay frog to be my head coach than Scott Arniel.
Shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, bad choice, Winnipeg.
Jesus Christ. And then on top of all that, too, is the Jets, and we spoke about this for a brief as well during the playoffs, was the Jets were having financial problems and attendance problems. And yet, you need to have a deep, far run in the playoffs, and you think Scott Arniel is going to be the guy to help you there?
He ain't gonna get him there.
Seriously. And the Jets, I feel like every other year, either they're a cup contender or they're a bottom five team. They're a
Yeah,
cup contender and they're a bottom five team.
right.
There's no consistency with the modern Winnipeg Jets.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't know what to tell you, Winnipeg, but you're gonna be in for some rough days ahead. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah, big time.
But
So for the Jets to hire Scott Arniel would be the equivalent of the Redskins hiring Steve Spurrier to be their head coach.
yeah, not a
Like
good
this is
move.
so bad.
Yeah, not a good move. But there is some interesting stuff though. So one of the things we wanted to talk a little bit about is the conference finals because we're down to of course the last four teams, and Dallas and Edmonton. There's no score. That game's just getting underway. But the Florida Panthers and New York Rangers. That is a series. They're tied at 2.
Yep, and three games in a row since game two have went into OT. The Rangers won two of them. The Panthers won game four, and it's going back to the Garden
Yep.
tomorrow night in game five. On Thursday, May 30th, I believe. Yeah, May 30th, tomorrow night. But no, the Panthers and the Rangers, that's going to be very, very competitive. I expect
Mm-hmm.
that. But it's going to get difficult as this progresses because I predicted the Rangers and the Stars since the beginning of the playoffs,
Mm-hmm.
and yet I have this joyous feeling that Florida is going to make this interesting and it's going to go
Yeah.
down to the wire.
Yeah,
That's how I feel.
very well could, and I'm hoping that Florida ultimately takes the series, obviously, because I can't stand the Rangers. But I am hoping that the goaltending is strong enough, and I'm hoping that the depth is strong enough because these two teams are pretty evenly matched. Although I think the Rangers will outdo the Panthers on paper, but I'm really hoping that the Panthers can actually dig in and get it done. And they have good goaltending. They have the tools to get it done. It's just they need to get it done.
Yeah, I think they do, but Igor Shesterkin has just been playing out of his mind.
Yeah, he's been crazy this series.
Yeah, that's going to be an issue. But Sergei Bobrovsky's been pretty good too,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nothing to sneeze about. I mean, great goaltender still. So that
without a
part
doubt.
will, yeah, that part will get interesting. And then, of course, we'll see what happens with Dallas and Edmonton. But I'll tell you, Ottinger's been lights out in this series so far.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, Jake Oettinger has just been killing it for the Stars, but I also think their depth has been a major part of this too.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Robertson's been phenomenal. Wyatt Johnson's been phenomenal. Matt Duchene has been killer for the
Yep.
Stars. Joe Pavelski, depth has really played a huge part on Dallas.
Yeah, Duchesne's really stepping up again like he did in the last series. Sagan's having a good series, so they're getting the job done. They're doing what they need to do, and now at this point, McDavid is saying that he expects the Oilers to bounce back. Well, you got to be clicking on all lines. That's all I can say.
And Dallas is also a really good road team this year.
Yeah, they are. They've won a big percentage of their games on the road. So,
I
so
say if Dallas wins tonight, then I think this is going to be a stranglehold for Edmonton.
yeah, I don't see Edmonton coming back if they lose.
No, I don't either. Because again, we mentioned it earlier, it's basically McDavid and Draisaitl. That's what makes up
Mm-hmm.
the team. And then Zach Hyman, who just happened to magically score 50 goals this year because he was paired up with those two, is all of a sudden, killing it. And then those three guys alone is not going to carry you to a Stanley Cup.
Right? It's not going to happen. Whereas with Florida, on the other hand, going against the Rangers, I mean, OEL is stepping up and doing a lot for the Panthers. So he's been a good
Oh,
fit.
oh yeah. I mean, of course, Reinhardt, Barkov, Kachuk, those
Mm-hmm.
guys are all solid. But I think for me, the Florida Panthers are running into a situation where if they don't win a cup this year, I think they're going to tear this team apart, and it's gonna really pain the team because they're over the cap.
Yeah.
Montour, Reinhardt, are all UFAs. Oliver Ekman
Mm-hmm.
Larson, I believe, is one. Bob might get traded. We really don't know. I mean, this whole ordeal is just a mess
Yeah.
festivity. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just insane.
Absolutely. And last but not least, before we go into the break, Columbus made some moves. They actually have a new president of hockey operations in Don Waddell.
Good move, Carolina. I had a feeling was not bringing it back, and then
Mm-hmm.
I forget the new interim guy's name for Carolina, something Tolsky or something like that.
I think
But
so.
he is now the new interim GM for the Canes, and yeah, I mean we'll see what he does because they have a big task coming up in late or in the early July, so we'll see what happens. But as far as as far as like one more piece of news before we get into football is
Hmm.
Ryan Smith went on the Pat McAfee show earlier today, and he actually revealed that there are four finalists for the Utah name, and two of them happen to be the Yeti and the Mammoth, but the other two have not been named yet. So if that's the case, then I firmly believe between the two, I think the Yeti's gonna win. I think Yeti,
Okay.
I think it's a very popular name, and a lot of Utah fans would be very, very pleased to have it happen. I mean, we really don't know yet, but I think both the Mammoth and the Yeti could be a good campaign, a good, business
Hmm.
tactic, I think, because you're trying to make it their team, is basically what
Yeah.
they're trying to do.
Yeah, 100%. My vote would go for the Utah Mammoth, although I do like the Utah Yeti name. And maybe we should do a little bet on this show here. See what we can come up
What is
with.
with you and Ben? Are you fucking poor?
No. So,
You're so full of shit and you
nah,
know it.
it's all good. No, I just like to see your face turn purple when we do the Vindaloo challenge, although we're probably not going to do that one again, but
Oh, you like to watch me swallow.
you.
I knew it. I knew it.
But, nah, we'll see what happens with the names. I mean, who knows. But with that being said, it's quick how it's funny how quick a first half hour goes. But of course, our friends at Just Dish got an offer, so stay tuned with that. We'll be back in about 30 seconds. I'm Tom Wujek, co-host of Buffalo After Dark. Founded by Matthew Keeler, Dishin is a Buffalo-based fashion label focusing on continuous experimentation in hockey. Their work consists of products, content, and experiences that inspire creativity. Playful curation provides energy that sparks a unique perspective and an ideology around seeing the game differently. Now you can save. Log on to justdishin.com and use promo code WUJEK at checkout. You'll save 10% on all of your purchases. That is spelled WUJEK. Dishin has built an influential following devoted to the infusion of creative expression through high-quality goods and tasteful collaboration. If you love creative products that push the boundaries, check out Dishin. Visit their website at justdishin.com. All right, welcome back to Buffalo After Dark. Of course, you got myself, you got Hanson here. We're going right into football, and we're only about 100 days away from the opening kickoff of the regular season. And of course, what does that mean? It means OTAs have gotten started.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's already been like teams reporting left or right. The Bills were one of them. They reported early to OTAs, and
Yep.
Josh Allen and Keon Coleman have been going at it as far
Yeah,
as
Coleman's
receptions and
looking good.
chemistry.
So big plus. And apparently Stephon Diggs with Houston's looking like a little bitch.
Well, that's not surprising at
And as
all.
usual, oh, I'm not going to show up.
Mm-hmm. So it's getting pretty interesting up there. But um, did you see the information that's come out about the OTAs?
Not a whole ton. I haven't really followed it this week, but I just know, I mean, our draft picks so far are looking pretty decent at least, so that's a big plus.
Yeah, so apparently Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network was reporting that the National Football League's Player Association, or the NFLPA, is working to finalize a proposal to overhaul the offseason starting as soon as 2025, eliminating voluntary on-field work in the spring in favor of a long training camp ramp up, with players reporting in mid-June to early July.
I don't know what to think about that. I mean, that is an interesting proposal, to say the least.
Yeah, so what I'm gathering is this is one big agenda by Roger Goodell. So basically what he wants to do, from what I'm gathering, is he wants the season to start in late August, like in the teens, and then have the season end around President's Day weekend, and that's including the 18 game regular season schedule along with the international games. He wants to eliminate the preseason entirely, but they can't do that. So instead of playing 3 games in the preseason, he wants to propose it to just two. So I'm interested though, like how everything is going to play out the way it is, because the NFL is changing at a rapid speed for the last 10 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And people have really come on to here, and they basically said, well, the NFL is making so many changes about making it for player safety and whatnot.
Hmm.
but you're also making it different for people's scheduling. So in the future, when we do Road to 32, it's most likely going to be an 18 game schedule.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not crazy about them going down to two preseason games. I would want to see the full three, and part of it's because I look at it this way: if we're evaluating talent and we're looking to see who we're going to have on our regular roster going forward, like every season, I don't think two games is really enough to kind of get like a full taste of like what someone can do. In certain cases, sure, it can, but at the same time, I think it hurts the chances of some fringe players possibly making a full time roster, or even making a depth part of a roster in certain
See,
senses.
I'm not sure about that because again, a Goodell is not a fan of preseason, and he wants to make as much money as possible. So what I think he's trying to do with all these proposals and all these changes is he wants to make it rapid, quick. You know, like in the NHL, you
Yeah.
have the season start. Like in the NHL, for example,
Mm-hmm.
it starts in like mid to early October. Playoffs start in this year at least in mid-April, and the Stanley Cup Finals is like let's say if it goes 7 games, June 24th is Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals,
Right.
and then 4 days later is the draft. So
Yeah.
my thinking, from what I'm gathering, is he wants to make the preseason in July, or I'm sorry, he wants to make the
Like
preseason
mid
in late
August.
July or early August, and then from there he wants to make sure the opening day schedule, because of again of the 18 regular season games, have the season start in mid to late August. And then end it around President's Day weekend with 2 bye weeks, by the way, which is I don't think that's a great idea.
No,
And
I don't
then
like
on
that
top
either.
of yeah, and then in March that would be the normal free agency and whatever. The draft would be normal.
Mm-hmm.
And then in May, what do you do? In
Right.
June, what do you do? I mean, they're trying to eliminate, voluntary OTAs. So
Yeah.
my thinking is, how is this going to work? Because what are you going to fill in between all that? Like flag football in the offseason?
Yeah, exactly. We all know that that sucks in the Pro Bowl, so it is what it is there. But it's like I don't get like this whole change on the schedule. I just really don't. I mean, at least it's only a proposal, but to me, it just doesn't make sense.
Well, it kind of does because the NFL is not only trying to do 18 games in the regular season, they're also trying to do international games in other countries. Like for example, Australia. They're trying to put games in a police state in Australia, which is
Right. Or
bonkers
Mexico
to
or
me.
Brazil or Australia, which is going to be new.
Yeah, and then in other countries like Germany obviously was brought up, London,
Mm-hmm.
England, of course.
Yep.
I've heard some stories about Ireland being an option for the NFL. And I'm saying to myself,
Be
like, I
interesting if it
appreciate the
happens.
effort. They're also talking about doing China, for God's sake. And
Oh,
I'm just saying to
good lord.
myself, why are you going so far wide to countries that don't even know what football is, or, that don't really have that much of interest in it?
Right. Well, surprisingly, I mean, China actually knows more about sports than we think because I mean they've actually had the NBA there before. They've had hockey there before, not the NHL, but they actually have had hockey there. They
Yeah,
actually
that's
have had
true.
baseball there. So I mean, and there is a Chinese professional basketball league that has teams in the major cities there. So and they
Yeah,
actually have good attendance. And same thing with their other sports; they've actually done pretty well. So I understand it to a point, but it's almost like to the NFL, it's like how much expansion is enough?
right. But like the NBA, for example, what you were just saying is the Chinese Communist Party, and I'm not trying to get political here.
Yeah.
The Chinese Communist Party itself donates tens of billions of dollars in investment to the NBA. So
Mm-hmm.
if the CCP doesn't like what the NBA is doing, they can immediately just shut off all their sponsors and all that stuff.
Right.
So that's why there's so much involvement. Like Yao Ming, for example,
Oh
in his
yeah, I remember
heyday.
that whole thing when he first was like signing with the Houston Rockets, and then basically what happened is that he still had to have his obligations to his Chinese team and all that. But
Yeah. So other countries handle it very differently.
mm-hmm.
Like the NHL does not has never went to China before, and I hope they don't because I don't like how things are run in China. But they do have they have a professional team in China, but I think it's in the KHL, I believe. I forget what they're called. I think they're called like the Red Star or something like that. I really don't remember. I know for a fact though that Mike Keenan coached there several years ago. I'm not sure what he's doing now. I don't think he's coaching anymore because
Yeah,
he's 74 years old, but
yeah. So to your point, it is called the Kunlun Red Star.
the Coolin Red Star, that's what it was.
So yeah, and they are basically the only pro hockey team that is based in China, and they actually play in Beijing, and they do play in the KHL. So that's the only team with any affiliation that's over there. So
With China.
yeah, yeah, only team. So it's interesting, but they apparently have a pretty good turnout there. So is it far out of the realm of possibility that the NHL might try to do something? I don't think so, but do I see the NHL doing anything in there anytime soon? No, I don't.
Yeah, why don't you throw the Middle East in there too? Like Abu Dubai, that's been one of the fastest growing cities in the world.
Oh
So
yeah.
they already host, Fight Island already. They're already owners of that specific island in the UFC. My cousin Manny Pavola has actually fought there and won a fight there during the 2020 pandemic. So that's not surprising to me that um that doesn't surprise me that the NFL wants to test that market because they make tens of billions of dollars a year. Like I
Oh
said,
yeah.
China, Ireland, Abu Dubai, or the Middle East just in general, Australia, they're really trying hard to really, reach out to a foreign like the NBA does. Like they get people from London, they get people from, Australia, they get people from Russia. They try to get all these other countries to
Yeah.
come play in their league. The NHL is very limited what they do, because you have guys like, Slovakia, Sweden, Russia, things like that, but they don't go extensively like, the NFL is trying to do or the NBA
Right.
is trying to do. Major League Baseball is very interesting because there's a lot of there's a big fan base in Japan considering Shohei Ohtani and Ichiro Suzuki and all the greats
Oh
that
yeah.
played for them. There is a big base for baseball in Japan. I think in specific that if whenever there's a global series going on in baseball in Japan, I would be almost certain that like that's the way they want to do it.
Yeah.
And it draws a crowd.
Yeah. And you mentioned Dubai. It is one of the world's richest cities, and take a guess at how much out of 420,000 official people living in the city. Take a guess at what the average net worth of people are in that city.
Oh, I don't know that. I mean, I would probably think maybe like over 5 million.
Yeah, definitely over 5 million. How about this? Average net worth, according to Publishers Weekly, of 17 million.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
It's a good market. But
yeah, it is.
just to give you a quick update, Dallas just struck first. It's 1-0 in
Yep.
Edmonton with Wyatt Johnson scoring.
Well, still time, but Edmonton, your ship is almost sailing.
Yeah, you're already on a bad start. So,
Yeah.
but in general, though, I'm interested what the NFL does from here in terms of how they reach out to the crowd and how they, reach out to all these, countries and say, hey, we want to play games here.
Yep, for sure. And here, speaking about some different things that have come up, uh, Brandon McManus, he is
Ooh,
in hot water because apparently what came out is he has some sexual abuse allegations he is going to have to deal with, and apparently, according to ESPN's Michael Duraco, there is actually a pair of women that have filed a lawsuit against a former Jacksonville Jaguars kicker, alleging that he sexually assaulted them on the team's flight to London for a game last year. And according to the article, they did file the lawsuit in Duval County Circuit Civil Court on Friday night, and they are seeking more than $1 million in damages. So apparently, they were working as flight attendants on the Jaguars charter flight to London in September 2023 ahead of their game against the Atlanta Falcons at Wembley Stadium. And the flight, according to the women, quickly turned into a party. So then, what happened is they are saying that McManus and other players disregarded the attendant's personal space, air travel safety, and federal laws. And apparently, McManus has allegedly recruited other flight attendants to the party and passed out $100 bills to try and get them to drink and dance for him. And then the first woman, according to the lawsuit, says McManus tried to kiss her while she was seated during turbulence. And apparently he also grinded up against her twice while she was serving food and drinks. And then the second woman is saying that McManus also grinded up against her during one of the flight's meal services. And apparently when confronted, McManus just smirked and walked away. And basically the second person remained on the plane's second level to avoid having to deal with them. So then it also says that the two women in the Jaguars lawsuit also basically are saying that that the team allegedly failed to supervise McManus and they failed to create a safe environment for the staff on the plane. And they have experienced severe mental anguish, anxiety, psychological and emotional distress, embarrassment, and humiliation. So then, of course, McManus came out with a statement. He says, quote, "To be clear, these are absolutely fictitious and demonstrably false allegations made as part of a campaign to defame and disparage a talented and well-respected NFL player." And that was according to McManus's lawyer. And then he says, "We intend to aggressively defend Brandon's rights and integrity and clear his name by showing what these claims truly are, an extortion attempt." Okay. Well,
That's a mouthful.
yeah, and well, the Jaguars are aware of it. They acknowledge it, and if it happened, McManus, you're a fucking idiot.
I don't think he's on the Jaguars anymore. I think, if anything, I think he signed with Washington.
Yeah, well, and that's one thing too. I mean, yes, the Jaguars did get rid of him, just in the off season, but at the same time, McManus, you gotta know when to say when if you actually did what these allegations say. But then
Well, I
we've
think
seen in the past too, allegations have been false allegations, such as Matt Ariza, how he got railroaded.
Oh yeah,
But
and it
that's
completely
a
ruined his
totally,
career.
yeah, totally different, a little bit of a different scenario, but still, I mean, we'll have to see how things play out.
See, I'm on the fence with this because that's a very descriptive allegation for a
Mm-hmm.
kicker in the National Football League. I'm not saying this because he's a kicker. I'm saying this is because, what you were just saying, Matt Ariza. We talked about this like 2 years ago, whenever it took place,
Yeah.
and it all came out the saying that it was just bullshit because she was just wanting money. And
Mm-hmm.
yet McManus of all people is apparently, like, for what it sounds like he was intoxicated and
Right.
then got aggressive. That's what it sounds like to me. But I'm not too keen on the whole, oh, he's guilty verdict because, well, if you look at due process,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be proven innocent until proven guilty at that point.
Right.
And to me, I feel like if McManus actually did it, then I mean, I really doubt it. Then he'll obviously will have a strong opinion about him, but it's kind of hard to say because these are just allegations.
Mm-hmm.
So realistically, it could go any direction.
Yeah, it 100% could. And how about this stat, real quick, with the Dallas game? One shot on goal for the Dallas Stars, and they went up 1-0.
That's sad.
Yeah. Although it could be worse, could be like the Maple Leafs, like earlier when they had their series, and they only had like 3 shots on goal in the entire like first 1.5 periods of the game.
Oh God,
That was
yeah.
bad. But
I think that was Game 7.
yeah, it was not pretty. I can
No,
tell
it
you
wasn't.
that. Yeah.
Not at
Uh,
all.
yeah. But considering, what, we've got about another 12 minutes left. Let's do a little bit of last call. Let's throw some random shit in here because we haven't done that in a while.
Of
So,
course.
how about this? Bryce Harper ends up taking close pitches in the Phillies' heated 6-1 win over the Giants, and that led to a bench clearing brawl.
Well, I mean, he's pretty much a prima donna at that point, but
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. It's Bryce Harper. I mean, he's always been this way. He got into an altercation a few years ago with Justin Papelbon when he was on the Nationals,
Mm-hmm.
and Papeldushel already was just a cancer, and yet he was already going at it with Bryce Harper, and just
Yeah.
Bryce Harper just attacked him. But no, Bryce Harper has always been a hothead, but he's really freaking good at what he does. Let's be
Yeah, he
honest.
is. Yeah. So basically, what happened? So the Phillies beat the Giants 6-1 in that specific game, and it happened actually in looks like the fourth inning is when the brawl came up, and Giants pitcher Kyle Harrison threw a pair of fastballs up and inside on Harper, and the second pitch, which was almost identical to the first, ended up pissing off Harper. So then basically at that point, you know what happens: charge the mound and fists go flying.
Well, I mean, Harpy over there has always been like this, and he's been in the MLB for 15 years. So I think
Yep.
for him to do that is not surprising,
Yep.
but
And his quote after the whole thing, he's like, he didn't mean it. I didn't want to get hit in the face again. That's about it. You get hit in the face, man. It's not fun. That's about it.
I mean, what can you really do? I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking about a fastball that's going to hit you in the face. Like some baseball players in general have always been like that, where they
Yeah.
get really, really hot. I know Milton Bradley, when he played for the Mariners, was always like that. He always threw a bitch fit, no matter what
Yeah. Or
situation
how
he was
about
in.
the big unit back in the
Mhm.
day?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
He
Milton
was
Bradley
another one.
was,
Yeah.
ooh, Big Poppy.
Well, Big Poppy got pissed off a few times and had some bench clearing brawls, but no, the big unit, Randy Johnson. I mean, there were times he got pissed off, and there's a few others I can think of. Piazza got thrown out a few times, so
I mean, it's God's word against theirs, I guess. I mean,
yeah,
and I don't take that lightly either, because, well, you're playing a kids game and everybody's throwing a fit.
yeah. Although there is actually one good thing out of MLB that came out. Angel Hernandez has been forced to retire.
Thank fucking God.
Worst umpire ever in Major League Baseball,
I do not miss him one
other
bit.
than maybe Joe West.
Yeah, that's right. Like Joe West and then Angel Hernandez. My
Yeah,
God.
and Joe West fucking sucks, but Angel
Yeah.
Hernandez was probably like the worst.
Yeah, he had some allegations. I think one was where he was in a case where he was allegedly betting on games or things like that. That's one I've heard, but it was never fully looked into.
Right. And then, of course, the players' union saved Hernandez after everything, and yet the players can't even stand him. So it's like,
It's what it is. But I mean, I do wish him retirement, like best of luck. But nobody in baseball is gonna miss you.
yeah, absolutely. Especially when it made the game all about him.
Yeah, basically. I mean, when you're that much of a distraction, you know you're in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. It
Oh,
was.
and we have a score update, and it's 2-0 Dallas.
Yep. Bye, Edmonton. Nice knowing you.
Yep, and you know what's the worst part? They only have 3 shots on goal.
Yeah, I saw Uckham was trying to mix it up a little bit just now too.
God, Edmonton, what are you gonna do with yourself these
Yeah.
days?
Yep.
Like,
They're
I
gonna.
can't even think of it that way because just the Oilers are just completely derailing in front of the whole country
Hmm.
again.
Yeah, they're imploding.
Like,
They cannot get it done.
yeah, they just no. I'm sorry, they cannot get it done. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But no, I do want to bring it to your attention about Angel Hernandez, and that is that I again, like I said, I don't miss the guy. I wish him all the best with retirement with his family, but dude, he
Hmm.
sucked in his job, so I'm not that
Yeah.
surprised.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. He sucks. So that's where we're at there. But then another thing for those who follow baseball, unfortunately, the NBA will no longer be on TNT because Amazon, NBC, and ESPN got the rights.
Oh well, so it sounds like what the NHL did a few years ago, where
Yep.
all their games were on NBC, with Doc
Hmm.
Emmerich and all those guys. Once the contract ended, they went right to ESPN and TNT. Which I'm very log jammed about that because I liked the broadcasting crew for the games on NHL NBC, but
Yeah,
then when
they
they
were
went
fine.
to ESPN, I mean, it was great that they went back, but the people they bring in did such a horrible job with covering the games. Like
Right.
every other year since 2021, 2022, I think it was the year when Seattle came into the league,
Hmm.
is then they just basically had all their games on ESPN, and then you had comments from Mark Messier and PK Subban making snarky remarks. Like I know it's their job to, tell people what's going on that's happening during the games,
Hmm.
but they don't do a very good job of it. TNT, on the other hand, is a completely different story.
They've actually surprised me. They've been really good with a lot of their coverage. and
Yeah,
that's the thing I hate about them losing the NBA, because they do a really good job with covering basketball. Their pregame and postgame show inside the NBA absolutely blows anything out of the water that ESPN or NBC have ever had.
yeah. I mean, I don't really care for ESPN's coverage. I mean, maybe 20 years ago, I'd say so, yes. But
Yeah,
as of the
now they
modern
suck.
age, it sucks. I do not like it. But then again, you're stuck for like 4 more years of this crap. But they're going to be they're going to be the main broadcasting team this year for the 2024 Stanley Cup Finals. So
Yeah.
that's going to be very interesting. Whoever goes in this year, they're going to have to do the broadcasting rights for the games, unless
Hmm.
TNT, gets a hold of their games or something like that. I really don't know how they're going to work this out.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I mean, I heard there was a possibility that they would, like, TNT would be sharing games with ESPN or like broadcasting rights or something. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I will say this though: TNT has always done sports pretty well. That's one of the big things. They've always done basketball well. It's just their parent company, Warner Brothers Discovery Media, didn't want to re up it based on the money, and yet here you are. You have great coverage, but you decided to stick with hockey instead of basketball, which has been your bread and butter for over 30 years.
Well, I mean, sometimes good things must come to an end.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like the casting crew for TNT. Like, I like that they have Henrik Lundqvist. I like that they have Anton Carter, and of course Wayne Gretzky.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Bissonnette, he is in this crew.
Yeah.
So Liam McHugh coming over from NBC to TNT. He's been doing that for a very long time. So I
Yeah.
think that for him, it shouldn't be anywhere into the unfamiliar zone at all for Liam McHugh.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just who he is. But I think what's interesting is if you compare TNT to ESPN's coverage in this modern day and age, they're so night and day from each other. Like
Yeah.
TNT goes into an extent with their coverage, and then ESPN just does a half-ass job. The only advantage that I think ESPN has, and I think it's generous, is they have a countdown for when the next period starts.
Well, actually, TNT has that
Well, I
also
mean, well,
because they,
either
they
way.
do show it during the intermissions.
Yeah, but I think they only do it very briefly. Like ESPN does it from like beginning to end when they have a commercial break or, if they're just breaking down the game real quick, like in between periods with Subban and Messier and all those guys. I don't know. Like it was something that always fascinated me about ESPN,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't control what they do and what they put on the program.
Right.
But I also don't like how they pick and choose what games they want to broadcast throughout the regular season.
Right.
Like during the playoffs, they get a lot of coverage,
Oh yeah.
but during the regular season, it's a completely different story.
Right. Yeah. And oh yeah, just to give you an idea, only 4 shots on goal so far. Edmonton, you
And the
have
crazy,
0 shots on goal, and you're already over 8 minutes in.
the other thing too is ESPN also covers the draft every year.
Right. Which I will say this: they do a good job with the draft.
They do.
That I will give them that. They do a good job with the draft, but other than that, I can't really think of too much else that we really got on the plate today. Other than you know, we'll fill you in on more details of Road to 32. Actually, let's end on that. You got Road to 32 coming up, and you got
Well,
another
yeah,
city.
I did, and last week I announced that I'm going to be going on a trip to Indianapolis, which was ticket number two, and then ticket number one was Seattle, which was the big one we do every
Yep.
year. The third one is, believe it or not, coming up in September, and late September, in fact. And Brittany and I will be taking a 3-day weekend trip to Baltimore.
There you go.
Yep, I'm going to Baltimore, Maryland. And if you recall, last year, Britt and I did a Road to 32 episode in Washington, D.C.,
Mm-hmm.
and we covered the entire trip from the Holocaust Museum to the Smithsonian Zoo to FedEx Field, bar none. And we got to
Mm-hmm.
do and we got stuck in the middle of the storm,
Yep.
mind you, in that situation. So realistically, everything is coming and playing at this point. So I think for us to go back to Baltimore, we actually foreshadowed this, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back into like the first 10 minutes of that episode when we were driving through Baltimore, we said Brittany actually said, to give it into her credit, she said we'll be back soon. 1 year later, we're already
You're
back.
back.
We're
so
going back to Maryland already.
good
Like Jesus
stuff.
Christ. but we're going to be in the heart of Maryland. Like, we're not
Hmm.
talking bullshit with like Washington, D.C.
Right.
We're not talking Landover. We're talking about 45 minutes right outside of D.C.
Yep.
in Baltimore, Maryland.
There you go. It'll be a good spot. So, it'll be an interesting game for you guys. And then, of course, like you said, you're going to Indy. We have the big trip in Seattle, which, of course, we're going to have all of the trips on your channel. We'll feature, of course, on here as well. So it'll be a good time. But, it's everything has worked out for this year. So, we're in good shape. It'll be a good
You,
time and be fun flying out. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
So, to kind of give you an idea, the final full tour schedule for 2024, our tour begins on September 29th in week 4 on Sunday Night Football. That's Bills Ravens. So, that's a primetime game right there.
Hmm.
And then Tom just mentioned week 8, we're going to Seattle to see the Seahawks at Lumen Field.
Yep.
I'm very excited about that. And then, last but not least, in week 10, Britt and I are going to Indianapolis to see the Colts at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis.
Good stuff. It'll be a good time. So,
Absolutely.
and I'm looking forward to seeing you in Seattle when we do that. And obviously I'm going to be coming down in the end of July to visit down on the island. So we'll have a little bit
Yeah.
of Road to 32 baseball edition going on again this year.
Oh yeah.
So,
And the funny thing is too is that Britt and I were talking about doing Detroit,
mhm,
and the reason why we chose Indianapolis is for one particular reason, is because at the time we were trying to get the tickets for the Lions, they did
mhm,
not have verified resale tickets that were available for gift cards. So
right.
what that basically means is people who have season tickets are reselling their tickets, but they don't accept gift cards. So you would have to buy it out of pocket to buy those tickets.
Yeah.
So Britt, and I think I've explained this before, was Britt had a gift card that my late father-in-law had,
Hmm.
and for over 250, and we found, just out of curiosity, is I found the Colts just out of curiosity, and they did not have verified resale tickets. So we were able to secure tickets to go to
Hmm.
Indianapolis. So I'm kind of bummed not doing Detroit, but I'm excited to do Indianapolis.
Yeah, it'll be a good time, and I know you're gonna be looking forward to it. I mean, obviously, we'll be looking forward to the big trip in Seattle on week 8, and with that, obviously, we'll have everything come up as we get underway. But other than that, I don't have anything else really to talk about this week. There really hasn't been a whole lot of sports news other than what we covered, but. I just want to say, as always, though, we do appreciate you guys joining us. Obviously, check out Spotify. We have some of our older episodes on there if you want to listen to this on the go. And in the meantime, let's call it a wrap. So, as always, take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you next time.
Peace.